Good afternoon, and thank you for coming to this afternoon's event. We want to just welcome you. My name is JD West, and I currently serve as the Vice President for the Hospitality Group for Cox Business. And we are super excited to have you guys all out this afternoon. It's been a great day today. I don't know how many of you have come by our booth and looked at the amazing job that we have, in that floor, but just incredible booths around. Dana, I'm sure you've been through many of them, but just a great event that we're kicking off here. So welcome to HITEC Charlotte. We have the pleasure of having two amazing companies come together today to talk a little bit about cybersecurity. We know that that's an incredibly important topic on everybody's mind, and it seems like every single customer I talk to, that is part of their equation on what they're trying to solve. And so we are honored today to have some of the most senior leaders of the two organizations come together. And so I'm not actually going to introduce them, but I am going to have them come up to the stage. And so first is Kim Keever. Kim Keever is Cox Communications CISO, and I will leave the introduction so that I don't take any thunder away. But Kim, thank you for joining us. We're so excited to have you here with us today. And then from Aruba, we've got Jon Green. And Jon Green, I want to make sure I get it right, is HPE Aruba Networking, CTO and CSO. And so, Jon, thank you for taking time from your busy schedule to be with us today. And then to actually do the introductions and run through the questions and to go through today's agenda, before I introduce it, guys, there's more seats up here. Please come up if you would like to sit down. I know many of you might be standing and walking the floor, so make your way up. In order to actually run that is Elaine Schuck, who is with the global leads the global hospitality marketing for HPE Aruba Networking. And she is actually going to facilitate today's discussion. And I'll be back up at the end to kind of wrap it up. But guys, once again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your business and partnership. And I'm looking forward to a great discussion.
Hello. So I have the pleasure of reading their bios today.
You can skip.
But I also wanted to welcome everyone to the Raising the Bar on Cybersecurity, sponsored by Cox Business, Hospitality Network, Blueprint RF, and HPE Aruba Networking. And so I'm going to start off with you. Kim Keever is SVP Cybersecurity and the Chief Information Security Officer for Cox Communications. Since joining Cox, she has built an industry-recognized security team that has implemented best practices to significantly reduce security risk. Her team is recognized for collaborative efforts and security innovation across the industry. In addition to her work in security, she has helped drive the adoption of enterprise risk management and the enhanced use of analytics to improve operations. In 2023, Kim was appointed to the National Security Telecommunications Advisory Committee, where she works with other industry leaders to advise the White House on key aspects of communication and information. She's done a lot. Infrastructure. In 2020, Kim received the Women in Technology Award presented by the Society of Cable Telecommunications Engineers, Women in Cable Telecommunications, and CableFax. In 2019, she was the Information Security Executive of the Year for the Southeast region and North America in the commercial category. Kim was named one of the most powerful women in cable by CableFax from 2017 to 2020. They wanted me to choose what to put for a bio, and you can't leave anything out, right? So, okay, Jon Green.
You crossed a bunch of mine out.
Nah, I'm going to read it because I didn't practice the crossing out. Okay, Jon Green is the Chief Security Officer for HPE Aruba Networking. He is responsible for overseeing all aspects of information and product security, as well as guiding the strategic vision for security technologies within the company's product and services. He manages the Product Security Incidents Response Team, Aruba's Threat Lab, and Aruba's Trust and Assurance Office, and is a member of the HPE Cybersecurity Governance Committee and the HPE Enterprise Risk Council. Jon joined HPE Aruba Networking in 2003 and helped it grow from a small startup to today's position as a leading provider of secure network solutions. Before HPE Aruba Networking, Jon held product management, marketing, and sales positions with Foundry Networks, Atrica, Nortel Networks, and Bay Networks. And this is interesting, outside of work, he is a commercial-rated airplane pilot, a flight instructor, an inspiring banjo player, and a competitive barbecue judge. Let's give him a hand. Okay, so I'd like to start with an interesting fact. So last year, the average cost of a data breach in the hospitality industry was, take a guess. Nope. $3.36 million. The hospitality industry confronts a multifaceted cyber threat landscape characterized by diverse attack vectors and persistent adversaries. Cyber criminals exploit vulnerabilities within hotel systems, IT, and OT networks, including reservation platforms, point-of-sale terminals, and guest Wi-Fi networks. The connected nature of hotel networks amplifies the effect of a breach, underscoring the importance of holistic cybersecurity strategies encompassing threat detection, incident response, cybersecurity visibility, and proactive defense mechanisms. Okay, we're going to start with Kim. Here's your first question. Let's start by discussing how AI impacts the cybersecurity landscape, specifically the new capabilities bad actors can leverage. And there's kind of two questions, so let me read them both and then you can answer. Does this make their deployment harder to mitigate? 1. What suggestions would you offer to prepare hoteliers and their staff?
So, good question, because AI is on everyone's mind today. And yes, I will say it definitely makes things a lot more challenging. So AI lets the bad actors, which, John and I'll tell you, it's, armies of bad actors sitting in office buildings and nation states working on this, literally. And then it's criminal enterprises collaborating together. And so all AI does is help them get better at things like making much better phishing emails. We train people to recognize phishing emails because they have terrible spelling and other kinds of grammatical errors, but AI will make them perfect. So that will no longer be something that you could think about. And then just other types of applications of AI, I'll tell you a story. There are other technical applications, but things that you may not think about. One of the groups, we have some sharing groups that we work in across the industry. And one of the things that the group, we meet once a month with one of these groups, and one of the things that started to be more and more prevalent that we're hearing now every time we meet in the last several months is people using AI, because the way our workforce has changed and how we have a lot of people working remotely and there may not be as many in-person verifications of people when they're hired. So people using AI to be able to hire people who are impersonating, who may be actual people working for nation states, but they're impersonating US-based people because they've stolen their identities. And they haven't ever validated them in person because our workforce has changed so much. And so we're hearing that over and over again. So just a real life kind of application of something that's happening now, firsthand. There is a flip side to that, though, that I think is good when we talk about our technologies, the technologies that we use to protect ourselves, and pretty common regardless of what industry you're in. But AI will enable us, and we're seeing this more and more, to better detect. When you're in cybersecurity, there's a lot of noise. So you have to look at a lot of different things. But if you can think about AI getting more and more efficient at detecting what is real bad stuff in the noise, that's how AI is going to help us. So it's going to hurt, but it's also going to help improve. And the way, the thing I can recommend is just, again, keeping up to date on your technologies, keeping patched, standard security hygiene for that. But so it's a good and a bad. And more will come because it'll be evolving over time.
Thanks, Kim. John, did you want to respond to that, or should I go on?
No, I think I mostly agree with that. The phishing thing is real. I mean, people probably all run simulated phishing exercises and that sort of thing. The bar is very low for those things, right? You can crank those up to a point where everybody's going to fall for it. And what what's really effective we call spear phishing, which is a phishing email that's crafted specifically for you based on publicly known information about you and your interests and groups that you talk to and that sort of thing. It's not economically viable to create spear phishing emails for everybody, but AI makes it so you can push a button and say, go pull in the LinkedIn profile for this person and then craft an email that they'll open. So that becomes a real issue. I think on the whole, as Kim mentioned, I think that AI probably accrues more value to the defenders than it does the attackers on whole. And again, if you're looking at something like a managed service provider that has data from all kinds of different types of networks and organizations, and being able to create data lakes out of that and then have AI run across that, you can spot patterns, pretty effectively using machine learning type technology. So I think that's going to be really useful from a detection standpoint.
Thank you, John. Okay, question for you. How can network consolidation and zero trust principles be effectively integrated to enhance cybersecurity in the hospitality industry? And the focus for hospitality is converging back office, guest, and IoT.
That's for me?
Yes.
Oh, you said zero trust. All right, so zero trust is this buzzword that everybody's heard of in here, and it's overused and abused to the point now that people don't know what it means anymore. It doesn't mean we don't trust you or the user or necessarily the device. What it does mean is we don't trust the network. And so I've been going to the DEF CON conference for as long as I can remember now, and hotels used to be kind of popular targets for some of the talks that people would give and say, oh, look, I got onto the back of house network and here's a Windows NT server and the credentials are admin, and look what I can get into. That's an example of the anti-zero trust pattern, to say your presence on that network is what allowed you to get access to the thing that you were going after. And whoever installed that system said, oh, this is on the back of house network, there won't be any untrusted people on it, and so we don't care about what credentials we set on it or kind of how we secure it. That was kind of the old way of thinking. And zero trust basically says, don't trust any network. No network segment is inherently trusted. Everything's going to require some form of authentication, encryption, access control, and so forth. And so you basically treat all of your internal systems as though you're connecting them directly to the public internet. You don't actually do that. Some people have gotten confused about that and said, oh, well, we'll just eliminate firewalls and eliminate all this stuff. But you treat it that way. You would never put a unpatched Windows NT server on the public internet with default credentials. Like, hopefully you wouldn't, but people do crazy things. That's what zero trust is really all about. And so I think, especially in the hospitality industry, and we see this in federal government and other places, those early experiences kind of said, well, there's too great of a risk here. We have to air gap everything, and so we're going to have separate networks for every potential service that we want. And that can be good from a security standpoint, but it's also inconvenient, it's expensive, and in a lot of ways it's overkill. There are ways to do this today through things like network segmentation, and we've got technologies there that can make it possible to keep things separated against somebody kind of doing that old school attack of, oh, there's a port on the wall, let me see what that port connects into, plug into it, and now I'm on the admin network. So hopefully that's an answer for that.
Thank you, John. Did you want to respond to that?
No, I mean, I completely agree with what John said. And, I think when you talk about zero trust, it's evolved over time. I think it used to seem, it was overwhelming to what you said, for people to think about. But now, with all the things that have happened, it's a lot more accepted that we were going to have to implement these things.
Yep.
And, doing other things like knowing what devices you have, limiting access only to your own device, the one that is a company approved, and access by only an authorized user. So just really understanding who the people are and the devices as well. And so I think it is a buzzword. Totally agree with you, but it's mostly about just allowing access as needed to the right people and the right devices.
Yeah, to your point, there was a time when if you told the CEO or somebody in senior management, well, you have to go through all these security layers to get to your stuff, they'd say, no, make that go away. I don't want. And today, if you said that, they'd probably fire you for not doing your job, because I think they get the picture now. They've seen the 3.6 million or whatever it is that people are willing to go through those extra steps.
Thank you. Okay, Kim, back to you. So this again is a two-part question. What is the President National Telecommunications Advisory Council is the first. Cybersecurity is one of the 5 focuses of the National Committee. Can you share some recent findings and best practices the committee has gathered that would apply to hospitality?
So it is the National Security Telecommunications Advisory Committee, and it was started back in the 80s when there was concern about lack of controls or the breakup of the Bell system, which is pretty interesting. What the group does is a pretty small group of about 20 people, and it's nonpartisan. So if the administration changes, the people generally stay the same, come and go, but you do have to work in the area. And what we do is we are the group that serves as industry's perspective to the government. And so what they do is they come and they ask us to study something. So like recently they said, we need a perspective on what are the best practices on managing and incentivizing proper cybersecurity, because obviously there's a lot of problems, and so give us your recommendations for what we need to get better. And so what the group does is you study that topic for a while, you get industry experts. So in this particular group, I was one of the co-chairs of that group, and we had 3 meetings a week. I wasn't in it, obviously there's all of them, but there's a bunch of people working on it, where you hear information on the topic from industry experts. So we had researchers come in, we had companies like AWS, Google, Microsoft, we had the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, we had other types of companies come in, and they gave us their perspective on what they thought was important. And then we synthesize things in and give a report back out that then gets typically turned into an executive order on whatever the topic is. The new topic that they're covering, a couple of new topics, like there was 5G wireless security. Now that we're looking at advanced AI and cryptology and some other things like best practices for cloud providers. But it's basically an opportunity for business and industry to give the government the perspective on what we think that topic should be. I guess it helps because it allows us to give our perspective and avoid too much regulation, and then it lets the government get our perspective and learn from us. And so it's a really good experience, lots of sharing and kind of humbling, right? So, but it's a great experience. What was the second part of the question? Oh, the topics. Yeah, I did that.
You did.
I said
You
it
did
at the
it
same
all.
time. There you
Nice
go.
work. John, do you have any comments on her question?
It sounds cool.
All right.
You get to go in the White House?
Yes.
You know who the Wi-Fi provider for the White House is?
That
All right, go on.
is quite a process to get
Yes.
in, so to get into the White House.
Okay, we're going back to John, and then we'll come back to you on the Section 2 questions, because
Okay.
you answered the zero trust one already. Okay, so John, what tools and technologies can the hospitality industry utilize to enhance cyber attacks management and network security?
I kind of discussed that already, but if you're a large organization, there's a whole bunch of stuff, and AI is one of those technologies that you can use. There's kind of machine learning for anomaly detection on networks and systems and things like that, which basically says, I don't know if this is good or bad, but it certainly is much different than it was yesterday. And that's one of the interesting things that's kind of newer. If you're a smaller organization, managed service provider, managed security provider, because it is difficult to do this yourself. And we've seen lots and lots of companies struggle with it, and then kind of the ransomware actors are coming after anyone that they can. They're sort of opportunistic about this, and they're going to try to come after you if you have insurance and get the full insurance payout and that sort of thing. And so there's rooms, as Kim said, there's rooms of people sitting in places like Kolkata that are just, they're professional ransomware actors, and they're professionals at trying to compromise whatever they can and get whatever kind of financial payout that they want out of this. So we're not in kind of the world of the amateur hacker anymore that's just doing it for fun. People have turned this into a business, and it's essentially what organized crime has become now. And so if you're a smaller organization with a smaller budget, outsource this because you don't stand a good chance. It's an odds game, right? Over time, they're going to get you eventually, and it can be expensive when that does happen. So I think that is one of the bigger tools that people can go for, is to find someone that can take care of this for you. Invest in prevention. I'm going to, putting my vendor hat on here, 90% of what we provide in terms of our cybersecurity capability sits on that protect side and the prevention side and if you spend a lot of time up front with things like silly, boring things, right? Network segmentation, authentication, the basics, that gets you a long way towards making sure that something small stays small and doesn't blow up. And it's not kind of the sexy part of cybersecurity that people make movies about and TV shows about. It's kind of slow and methodical, and we're plugging in a new system today. Let's threat model this and figure out how much do we need to protect it, and so forth. That can go a long way, and it sounds basic, and it is basic. A lot of people skip right past that. So there's a few thoughts.
Thanks, John. So we're going to kind of go to the whole, since we talked about the vendor, HP Aruba networking. So how does Cox promote the culture of vigilance and accountability to recognize and respond to threat proactivity?
Can I answer that, but also add on to his?
You bet.
So I think what John said is right. I'll say one of the other things to think about too is, it's completely right when you talk about the expertise and outsourcing, but even within companies, even with small companies, really need to get your own awareness internally, because even if you are outsourcing it and you have an issue, the leadership at a smaller company is still going to have to get involved when something bad happens. And you're going to have to prepare yourself. You don't have to be the cybersecurity expert, but you have to be prepared. You have to discuss and have the pre-planning discussions about how you might react when your vendor comes to you and says, here's what's happening. We're seeing this bad actor, you've been attacked, or whatever the case may be. So it's tying all of that in, because I think part of it is the reaction, right? The reaction to the closing down. The experts need to be running the platforms and understanding the tools, but the businesses themselves also have to be prepared and understand what they might be dealing with. And that's a tough thing. It really is a tough thing. But thinking about, well, what would I do if I was ransomware? How would I handle that? Would I pay the ransom? Somebody might say, well, it depends on the business you're in, right? And just food for thought.
Yeah, and there's a buzzword now popping up, cyber resilience, which kind of gets to what Kim's talking about, which is understanding that these issues will happen, but how can you prepare your organization so that it's not a disaster when it does?
That's right. So, but back on the awareness, so back to the original question, which was about what do you do for awareness? We've talked about a couple of those things, but I think there's always a good company culture. For us, and I think this is important for every company, it's hard to miss because in the news every day, I always tell people, whenever something comes up at work, I'm like, you don't hear about building XYZ thing on the news all the time. You hear about somebody was hacked, and here's what happened to MGM, and here's the latest and greatest thing that happened. So we have great tone at the top where we understand that that's something that's super important. And so a culture of supporting cybersecurity and constant security awareness. And so for me, when something's going wrong and there's something bad, my immediate thing is to tell everybody, the people who need to know, because I want people to know about the weaknesses. I want us to be able to shut things down immediately and get support for it. So that's an important kind of culture. The other thing is to train people. So the phishing we talked about, you got to do the phishing. You got to also do things like just general awareness on privacy issues. And one of the other things that you can do is you can actually reward people for proper behavior. So one of the kind of fun things that we do is when people do fall victim to, or not fall victim, but when they notice maybe like a phishing message, or they can report it. Or if they notice a SMS, like a text message, they can report it. And when they report it and recognize it, we recognize them internally by putting them kind of on our internal internet, saying, John, look at what John did. He discovered this today. Or look at what Jose did. He discovered this. And so we make stories about them, about how they stopped the bad actors. So things like that, promoting a good culture, not getting people in trouble. I mean, I heard years ago where people would fire people for falling victim to phishing. That's not
That's dumb.
That's not a good thing. You need to make it okay. I mean, my opinion is make it okay. Provide a culture of support to get people to report things to you. So that's what we do.
Do you have anything to add on our behalf? Okay. All right, this is the last set of questions. And I'm going to go ahead and go with you, Kim. What are some ways to encourage, oh, I'm sorry, this is John, not Kim.
Oh.
They had the name underneath, and I was thinking, okay, but I didn't write the name next to it. Okay, what are some of the ways to encourage guests to use personalization measures to better enjoy their experience amid security concerns?
I'm going to offer one thing here for hotel operators and people that work in that industry. I can't find the gym. You guys have all taken away those books that used to be in the room that would tell you where all the stuff is in the hotel. And so I got to wander either to the front desk in my gym clothes or just like walk around looking like an idiot. So I need some way to find that. Those tablets that people are putting in hotel rooms are actually really useful for things like that and for lowering the shades. And they do a bunch of cool stuff. But they also have a little tiny light sensor in the front that looks to me like a camera. And so think about things like that and privacy, and I'm sure they don't have cameras in them, but they sure look like they have cameras in them. So yeah, it depends which hotel. I don't go to those. But yeah, the personalization stuff is really interesting. I was kind of resistant to it because I go to so many hotels. I travel so much for work, and I'm sort of used to my routine of walk in, get my key card, go up to the room, do whatever. And I've started using the check-in on my phone. That's not perfect every time, but it's nice. Occasionally, it actually takes my preferences, like I want to be far from the elevator on a top floor. Most of the time, not so much. And I think that the security concerns, I have a lot of those. Like, who else can get a mobile key to my room? But I'm not sure it changes a lot from sort of the threat model of an average hospitality location. I think from the operator perspective, it's that idea of, I walked the show floor today, and this isn't my field, and so I was kind of fascinated by all the different gadgets that you can get out there, and kind of systems that when somebody cleans a room, you can immediately update that it's cleaned, and there's proof of it, and all these other, but they're all connected, right? And so the network becomes a really big deal, and it gets back to that idea of segmentation that we talked about before of are you going to build a separate network for every one of those types of gadgets out there? I'll give you a piece of experience that I had. We did the Wi-Fi network for the Pentagon probably 7 years ago. I've blocked it out because it was a lot of trips down there. But one of the big concerns was they said, we want to do guest Wi-Fi in the Pentagon. And really, the DoD CIO says, I want it to be like Starbucks. And the reason was that, the rest of the team said, sir, this is a military, you can't do that. But he kind of was persistent. And to his point, there's a lot of people in that building every day who don't work there full time. And it was a black hole. You would go in there and the cell signals don't penetrate 5 layers of concrete and stone block. And so people, I would go in as a vendor, and I'm basically in the dark. If I have to look something up, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no cell signal. But people who are employees there, they can't get phone calls. And then also there's a lot of pretty senior military commanders who would come in every day, and they're just there for a day or they're there for a week. They got no access because they're just not a normal employee there. That was kind of why he said he wanted a guest network. It wasn't so much for the general public coming in for the Pentagon tour. It was for people who have a legitimate purpose there but aren't stationed there 100% of the time. And they said, okay, well, at the same time we do the guest network, we want to do, they call it the NIPRNet. It's the non-classified, but it's the government network, and only government-issued devices connect to it, requires FIPS validation, requires CAC authentication, all these things. And they said, okay, we can do that. It's separate air-gapped networks. And my sales guy's eyes lit up because he says, the building the size of the Pentagon, I can sell double the number of Wi-Fi access points that I would otherwise have sold. But that was not a good plan from a radio frequency management perspective, from a cost perspective, et cetera. And so we spent probably 1.5 years figuring out how do we bring those two networks onto the same physical equipment so that you don't have to have these things split apart. And they were dead set against it to begin with. They said it's never been done this way before. So lots of trips up to NSA. NSA says that's a common criteria accredited firewall. It's built to do this purpose. You can have this, and then They red teamed it for probably 4 months afterwards, trying to get from the guest network over to the unclassified network, and they never got it done. Their one piece of advice at the end was, we can tell that you're using Aruba Wi-Fi because of the MAC address that's broadcasting in the air, and you should probably change that to fool the attackers, and also you should swap out access points every 6 months so that people won't learn where this one, and again the sales guy's like, oh yeah, throw these away and just I'll sell you new ones every 6 months. But they did not take those recommendations. But that was kind of this is an extreme use case, right? And so I think the threat profile is somewhat lower in hospitality if you've adopted this sort of zero trust mindset. And so maybe you don't put everything onto the same networks, but you've got some kind of more coarse-grained segmentation to say, the guest network is over here, it's always a guest network no matter what. This is always a back of house sort of network, and this one over here has a random collection of IoT devices, all the soda machines with their radio transmitters and the lighting control systems and stuff that's not super critical, put that over here. And you can kind of go down this pathway of how do I want to do this, either Wi-Fi or wired, et cetera, but you can get a common set of infrastructure. And I think that's what we hear from a lot of hospitality customers is, we want to get to this single infrastructure because we need all these services to show up everywhere. It's expensive for us to have to kind of recreate things in different locations. I don't know if I'm even answering the question you asked me anymore.
I think everyone's just loving what you're saying, so it doesn't even matter that you answered the question.
But that's kind of, so that's a thought on the operator side of how to, we're getting back to the customization and all that. You need these networks to show up everywhere if you want people to take advantage of them. So I want to be able to control the TV in my room from the bar or something. I don't know why, but because I can do it at home, I guess.
Gotta have it ready to watch Netflix when you get back,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So that ubiquity of network connectivity is one of those things. To put a product plug in, one of the new places we're going now is in private cellular, and so private 5G or private 4G. And the place where this has had a lot of interest is in stadiums and sporting arenas for the security network. And so that's another form of segmentation where they say, I don't want the security guys and their phones, which can see all the security cameras, to be on the Wi-Fi, because if it gets crushed by the fans, all uploading something from whatever's going on out there, we don't want that network taken out. And so that's another form of segmentation, is to split that off entirely as well. Anyway, that was enough rambling for.
Thank you. Did you want to comment on that question?
I agree with it. I mean, I think it's so important. All of these new capabilities, the IoT capabilities, all these cool personalization capabilities, it makes such a difference to the guests who are visiting, and their experience is so enhanced. And then when you pair that with the complexities of trying to run multiple different environments, it makes it an IT nightmare that costs too much money. So you really have to do it where you can find a way to segment things, properly control, in order to meet both needs, right? You got to control your costs, but you also got to help serve customers. So I agree with that a lot. Yeah.
Another customer example I'll give is Home Depot. So Home Depot Wi-Fi, they have all these IoT devices coming into the stores every day that they don't talk to IT security, or they don't talk to anybody. They just hook them up. And they kind of had to go from this, do I create a separate network for every single type of IoT device? They've ended up on something where devices they recognize go to one place. These IoT things kind of go onto a general purpose network, and they have internet access only. That's all they can do. They can't talk to each other. They can't talk to anything else in the store. And that's kind of been a decent middle ground for them of not blowing up the costs of managing these whole things while still letting the business get done what it needs to get done. Versus like the Pentagon, if it's an unrecognized device, it gets nowhere. So you've got kind of extremes in those policies. But the key is kind of identity at the edge. When something connects to the network, you need to know what that thing is, who it is, et cetera, and then give it the appropriate access rights for what it needs to get done.
Thank you. This is the last question. We're going to start with you, Kim. What are the cybersecurity challenges presented by growing innovations in the hospitality industry, and how can we meet to face them?
Well, look, I'll say the great thing, we always talk about cybersecurity, and it's a race without a finish line. That's what that's something somebody coined, right? So because there's constant changing, it's always something new, it's always something different. The great thing is that it's a community of people who work really closely together. And so we share, and we're getting better and better at fighting the bad actors. And what I would say, well, first of all, when I talk about the bad actors, the thing to be aware of is that, and I can't not speak without giving this information, but I think years ago, and even when I say years ago, even recently as a couple years ago, people thought that certain industries were immune. You know, the bad actors, if you're a nation state, you're not going to be interested in this industry because of X, Y, Z. Well, we know recently, a few months ago, Christopher Wray went to Congress. He's the head of the FBI, and said, you know, based on intelligence that's now is made public, that nation states are interested in every industry in our economy because of future potential geopolitical conflicts. And so that should be a warning to people, because they definitely they know that they're interested in all kinds of industries. There's that piece. And then the other piece is these very industrious, almost like, I don't know, mafia type criminal enterprises that study and learn about each industry and get to know, so they become very effective. And that is, I'm sure people are familiar, that is exactly what happened with MGM. Scattered Spider, I don't know how many people are familiar with that, but Scattered Spider had been attacking industry after industry after industry, learning about industry after industry after industry. And these are people like 18, 19, 20-year-old people. They just arrested last week one of the heads of it, and these were U.S. based, Britain based. These are local people. These aren't nation state attackers, but they were attacking the industries that they could learn about to try to extract funds and, you know, earn money criminally. And so just some other things that are unexpected that people wouldn't think, but that is what happened. In fact, these people were so funny. I don't know if anybody knows this, but a few months ago, there was a story on 60 Minutes about Scattered Spider. Well, and it was you know, a current story. So 1 hour after that story broke, Scattered Spider started attacking. They started attacking us. They started attacking all these other victims, and our industry collaboration and cross-industry collaboration learned. It was basically like these teenagers, they got mad because there was a report about them on you can't make this stuff up, it is true. They got mad because of the story on 60 Minutes, and then they literally started attacking. You could see it. And I went to a meeting in Toronto last week, and all the people there shared, oh yeah, we were all attacked too, right? You know, an hour after 60 Minutes. And so it's hard to believe, but every industry is a victim. And so, you know, the best thing that I can say is there's lots of new technologies, there's great new technologies, but you have to stay up to date with it. You need to regularly assess your environments to understand where you have gaps, because things change all the time. And so regularly assessing, understanding your footprint, making sure that you have good critical cyber controls. And those aren't something that are new and innovative. They're like out there. You can go look at NIST, the National Institute of Standard Technology, is recommending there's a set of basic security controls. You just need to do them. You know, you need to do them. And then constantly reassess. And so it's not necessarily about the new and exciting technology. It's continuing to be aware of the new and exciting technology and make sure you have them in place, but it's also maintaining hygiene, awareness, and constantly assessing and training your people and practicing for attacks. It's a holistic cyber strategy. So nothing new and fancy, but just kind of tying it all together. That it's really a lot of different components that you got to think about.
Thanks, Kim. John, you have the last comments, and then we'll take questions from the
Yeah,
audience.
a few things, I guess. One is that, I mean, the actions of people like the SEC and those and you know, Treasury and CISA in the last year have made this into a business problem. It's not a technology problem anymore. It's absolutely a business problem. And so, you know, they're in one case they're coming after an individual in his individual capacity and saying, you committed fraud by essentially lying to shareholders about the state of your organization's cybersecurity. That's a bit scary. And there's other, you know, we've now got disclosure deadlines in 8K filings and things like that if we've got a material cyber incident. So that's kind of raising the profile up in terms of who's paying attention. I'll echo what Kim said. nation states engaged in espionage are interested in what the hospitality industry has. They've gone after healthcare. They've stolen all of those records. They've stolen travel records. They've stolen government personnel records. They're just building databases on every person that they could potentially. So where those people go and where they stay, and kind of what their room bill looks like, and all these things are interesting little tidbits that by themselves may not be that interesting, but you combine it with all the other data. That's really what they're trying to build, is personal information on as many people as they can. The criminal organizations, MGM is an interest. There's a lot we don't know about MGM, but you kind of wonder. There were people kind of live streaming what was going on as they were in the MGM property when this thing was going on, and MGM kind of put out a statement that says everything's under control, and they were immediately contradicted by people who were on site saying, I can't get into my room, the elevators don't work, like everything stopped working there. And I don't know the answer if that was because someone pulled the plug and shut it all down and said, let's stop any further potential damage, or if they really had control, if the ransomware actors really had control of that many systems. It's hard to believe that everything was kind of combined together in that way. So I tend to think it was the former, that MGM themselves pulled the plug on this stuff, but it was really obvious to people and the damage that was done. And then Caesars was just, a couple months later, right? Very different outcome, at least in terms of how that whole thing was managed. They said we're going to pay the ransom, and kind of kept the lights on, and probably their decision was influenced heavily by what they'd seen 2 months before, but these are the sorts of things that are possible. The criminals will go anywhere they think they can get the money.
Well, thank you both. We have some time for questions, so if you just raise your hand, I'm sure you have tons of questions. I'll just come by. Oh, you're going to do this? All right, cool.
Only easy ones, please.
An easy one. What would be one recommendation you make to CISOs or MGM?
I hesitate to go there because I wasn't there, and a lot of what happened wasn't necessarily made public. I mean, Caesars said a lot out loud. They were much more transparent about kind of what was going on, but even that was the message they wanted to deliver. So without being in their shoes and seeing kind of what was going on there, I don't know that I can offer anything meaningful.
Yeah. I also think the thing that people don't really know is that when you have an incident like that, it can take a really long time to get to all the details of exactly what happened. And so that's to Jon's point where he said we really don't know for sure, and they may not necessarily disclose it for a while. But so it's hard to make a judgment because we don't know. I mean, like just an example, when you have, like, if you have one compromised person, you've got to kind of go through every single thing that happened to that person on their laptop, in their email, all those kind of things. So when you have a big incident like that, you've got to go through investigating everything, investigating all your connected systems. That's why it takes so long. So we don't really know.
And Kim said before, and this is a good point, on the ransomware issue, have a plan ahead of time. There's a lot of people that philosophically say, I will never pay the ransom, and that's what MGM said. And they were down for 10 days or 15 days, something like that. They didn't pay the ransom, and they probably are ending up with a much improved cybersecurity posture as a result of all of this, but they went through some pain to do that. There's others who say, and not paying the ransom is good for a lot of reasons. You're not funding nation state, terrorist activity, all these things. And so the government will tell you don't pay the ransom, et cetera. Because it just, obviously, if we keep paying the ransom, the bad guys are going to keep doing what they do. But that's a business decision because there's a number of valid reasons why you would pay the ransom. And if you're in a life critical,
right, what if you're 911 service?
A 911 service, there's consequences to not getting your systems back online, right, and that sort of thing. And there's consequences because they don't just do ransomware now, they do extortion plus ransomware, where they steal all your data first, and if you say, no, I'm not going to pay, they start contacting your customers and saying, hey, we got your data, we got it through these guys. They're not going to pay, so we're going to release it. And now turning up the pressure on that sort of thing. So have a plan for what sort of thinking process you would go through and what sort of planning you would do. And we just did this real recently inside HPE, and Our CEO, Antonio, was involved in this, and it was really enlightening towards what information does he want? How would he think about this? Do these tabletop ransomware exercises. Maybe that's my advice to anybody is do a lot of these tabletops where you practice with real scenarios and figure out how would I think about this problem when it comes up for real.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm going to add to that too. When we used to talk about disaster recovery, and people would kind of debate that, like, what's the likelihood of that happening? It's pretty unlikely to happen. But with ransomware, it's pretty likely that it's going to happen. And so I think companies are starting to have a lot more traction getting funding for ransomware vaults where you back things up and running these exercises, because it resonates a lot more than where somebody says, well, my data center's in some place that never gets hit by her, or I'm in the cloud or whatever. The preparation for these kind of things is, from a business perspective, a lot more accepted than it is for general kinds of recovery. So that's the good news, I think, out of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, curious to understand if you have sort of a recommendation for, is there a sweet spot for sort of network segmentation? You typically will see sort of the traditional Mac house gets that kind of stuff in the hospitality space, but bifurcating IoT type devices and that sort of stuff, you can take it to the nth degree if you really want to, becomes operational. That's it, right? Is there sort of a best practice or a sweet spot that you see in this space?
I look at it, the means of authentication is one of those ways that you can kind of decide on segmentation. I would rather have, a laptop with a certificate on it, or a username and password even, that I have really good confidence that the thing at the other end of that connection is the thing it claims to be. And those tend to be kind of the higher security value areas of the network. And so turning on that authentication type is, gets me into kind of the more sensitive, again, zero trust, right? We should treat them all as equally unsensitive, like don't trust anything, but the reality is people kind of have to. That's kind of one way to do it. And then IoT devices, you often don't have good authentication methods available with those. You may get a MAC address, and obviously MAC address is not a secure way to do anything. But if that's the best that you have, then go for it and say, well, that's a television screen, and so I'm going to give the television screen permissions on the network according to being a television screen. And if it turns out to actually be a printer or somebody trying to break into something, well, the worst that they're going to do is whatever the TV screens can do. So kind of to take that least privilege approach to it. And then kind of guest users are their own thing, I think. I think guest is kind of, that's where you can kind of, from a Wi-Fi perspective, say this Wi-Fi SSID is always guest access, and that's the only thing it's there for. We know we don't trust the people on there. We're going to give them internet access and nothing more. And then ideally the wired ports, we can do things with that where you can say, well, that wired port could be an internal back of house port or a guest port, depending on whether you authenticate or don't. I almost say if you got ports going to the guest rooms, just always treat them as guests, and that's an easier segmentation to do. So our guys that work in this space may have better recommendations than I do, but that's kind of how I would think about it. Over-segmenting is a problem, though. I've seen hotels with 16, 20 Wi-Fi SSIDs to handle every kind of category of device. That's both inefficient from a radio frequency utilization standpoint. It's hard to manage. It gets confusing for people because they're like, which one do I connect to? And a lot of the equipment can handle it. So there's a use case, or there's a case of over-segmenting as well.
Yes, what presents the greatest vulnerability between end users, network, hardware, and software, and what can the hospitality industry do to improve their security posture against those threats?
Well, I always think it's the end users, because there are, and here's why, because it's unpredictable what people might do. You can train them, but what happens if somebody tries to bribe them for their access and they happen to need the money, right? And so with technology, you can lock it down, but to me, with people, you can't always control that element. So from my perspective, I think users tend to be more risky. And that's where it comes in where you really got to have the zero trust. But even if you have zero trust and somebody gets somebody's legitimate access, you've got the risk, right? Because they've given it up. But it's training, it's looking at your people, their backgrounds, making sure that they, again, have the right culture. Because all the other stuff, you know, we've talked about a lot of different ways that all the other stuff can be controlled, right? With the other things, your risk is generally, if you know you locked them down properly, your risk is, well, what has changed? And then you got to figure out what's changed there, and has something come out of compliance, and then you set it back. But to me, it's users that are always the most challenging, because you can't, you know.
And guest users just don't trust them at all. I run the Wi-Fi network for DEF CON every year, and we run Wi-Fi, and you can go to the internet, and that's all you can do. You can't talk to it. And I've seen hotels where they've tried to set it up where, oh, you can AirPlay to your TV, and just plug a HDMI cable in the back and screw it in so that they can't steal it, and solve it that way. The network stuff, I just remember sitting in hotels and, oh, there's somebody's got Apple Bonjour running, and now I can see their Mac over there, and I can like steal their iTunes library, and it's not super harmful, but annoyances like that. No networking between the guest access would be my advice on that.
And they're going to bring to you whatever's on their devices that are infected.
Yeah.
So that's the other piece, is that they bring with them things that they may not even know they have on their device.
And that came up at the Pentagon. That was one of the big objections was, well, you're providing guest access in such a way that a person on the inside has to authorize you. They have to give you a code to get onto the Wi-Fi. And a bunch of people said, well, but then it's secure. Well, no, it's not, because you don't know what's on that device. It could be all kinds of stuff. And they were really concerned about, for whatever reason, like, what if somebody sends a death threat to the president and it's coming from inside the Pentagon network? And I don't know why that was the one they deep dived on, but yeah, anything can happen on these guest networks. You don't know. So kind of treat it with the appropriate defensive posture.
I don't need a microphone, I think pretty loud enough. Talking about the streaming side of what's going on with technology with the hotels, where Netflix and all that, with their TVs and that access point and point-to-point, because they're using Wi-Fi signal to get in and Wi-Fi to get out. So, and then end users are using their own QR codes or that technology there, because I'm more worried about the QR side of it than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do we make sure we're protecting our guests from that?
Are you talking about somebody? Tell me a little bit more about what you mean.
So, you know, when you're at the hotel, and what you were saying, you get on the AirPlay and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
All these TVs are connected to the Wi-Fi signal because they have to stream the technology in. So, how do you protect the TV that's there from anybody tapping into it or getting the signal from the guest or a guest using the phone or their laptop, whatever, to get on, and they're airplaying on the TV? But how do we make sure that protection's there? Is there?
I think from what I've seen, these hotel TVs are fairly bulletproof in that, because I think they've been attacked so many times over the years that now they've kind of caught up to, yeah, you can sign into your Netflix account on this TV, but as soon as you check out, it's going to wipe the settings for the next guest. That's what I've seen anyway.
But what if somebody hacks anybody who doesn't do that, and then somebody's going to grab it?
Yeah, it could happen. It's probably not your fault if it does, fortunately, but.
But also, the newer technology also, like, it'll log you out of all of that even when you turn it off. I mean, I've seen it where even if you got, and I'm not, unfortunately, I don't know exactly what the technology is, but it logs you out even when you turn the TV off. That's been my experience.
So yeah, somebody hacking the firmware of the television, it could happen. We know of guys that do things like that, but that's kind of, at that point, it's the TV manufacturer's problem to go and kind of deal with. And yeah, there could be the next guy in the room could get his Netflix credentials stolen, but I don't know if that's the end of the world. I hope. If it happened to my kids, it would be.
That's right. It's just the risk seems to be lower when you talk about those kind of things.
I think so. I think it's lower, but
yeah. One of the things that I know it's very interesting is being tossed around by the FCC is this thing called device labeling, similar to how you might, like your Energy Star rating. So one of the things that the chairwoman of the FCC has been interested in is getting people to voluntarily enroll in putting kind of a rating of how secure a device is for any kind of device that might reside on your network. And it's a really, we have spent some time talking about it because it's a really challenging thing, because if you think about it, you think about patching and vulnerabilities, those are announced every single day. And it's on the owner of the device that has to, I mean, if you have a device, you don't want somebody updating your, whatever it is that you have, you own it, right? And so how do you keep those things up to date, and how is that going to work? And then as we as like providers with access to that, are we supposed to cut people off if we see their device isn't, you know, patched properly? I don't know that our users are going to like that. We have to protect it in a different way, but there's a lot of discussion about that. So it's an interesting question that is going to probably evolve over time. And these things that are seemingly lower risk, you know, do we need, I mean, there might be something new that the bad actors come up with, who knows? So there's a lot of discussion in that space about it. More to come.
One of the talks I saw at a hacker conference once, this was a long time ago, like LodgeNet days, if anybody's that old to remember LodgeNet, but it was really funny. They controlled access to these channels based on the remote control not being able to push certain buttons, and so of course people just brought like IR blasters into the room and turned the channel, and the whole talk was, look, when the guy in the next room is checking out, you can view his hotel bill through your TV by just tuning to a different channel. And we're like, are you serious? But so I think those days are long behind us, but it's been something that's, you know, been on the minds of people for a long time now.
So you talk a lot about zero trust. What about the opposite of that, where you have aggregate trust scores? We all carry around devices that have microphones and GPS and SIM and IMEI that, you know, is authenticated to us specifically. There's a lot of companies like Persona and Google's getting on the bandwagon for the death of the password. And then you see the opposite of that with like MFA, multi-factor, two-factor. So do you ever see us getting to a point where there's an aggregate trust score based on, you know, me going to the same place 5 times a week and having this number and this SIM and it hearing my voice and the biometrics and the fingerprints and all that stuff? Do you ever see us getting to the point where passwords are gone? Because I would love that future.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be exactly in the way that you described it, but I think at some point there might be a place where passwords are gone, using different types of technology, right, to still do authentication. I don't know about an aggregate trust score. You know, that's evolving. I'm not exactly sure. Well, that's more to come, but it might be. You might see a time where you don't have passwords.
I've seen an interesting kind of multi-factor approach with some of them where, you know, authenticate, okay, provide your code, okay, you're in a new location that we've never seen you before. We're going to ask for an extra form of authentication, like a fingerprint or a biometric, or take a picture of yourself or something along those lines, where it's kind of adaptive multi-factor authentication versus if I'm in my house where I'm sitting all the time, it's not going to even ask me for the extra factor. So I've seen those sorts of things pop up. The passkey stuff, I worry about that. I'll tell you a story. I once left my phone on the wing of an airplane because I was doing something and I got in a hurry, and then I taxied the airplane out and took off, and I got to another airport and like, where's my phone? And I flew back to the other airport, and I was walking out on the stupid runway looking for it, and I found it, and it was dead. And from a multi-factor authentication perspective, I was screwed until I could get that phone back online, which fortunately the phone inside was still alive, so I replaced the screen, but that sort of set me down this path of, oh, I don't want to depend on this device too much, and that worries me a lot right now. Google and the likes are trying to force you into these passkey things, and I wonder how much of backup there is, or how painful it is to recover if you lose it. So I don't know, that doesn't answer your question, but.
Well, you think about things like all the secret questions, secret answers. So many of those have been stolen. They're out just like everybody's idea. SIM swapping, so that somebody could think you're texting something to the right number, and so that's why, to your point, there a lot of new types of adaptive technologies are coming.
And they proposed biometrics as a way to deal with the I lost my device. And I worry about that because if somebody steals my fingerprint, I can't change it. I can change a password, I can change a PIN, but once that fingerprint's out there and people can use it to impersonate, and yeah, there's technologies to try to stop you from doing that, but I don't believe in them yet. So I don't know the answer to the question. I don't know if we'll get to that point.
And AI impersonating your voice, that's another.
Oh, the Fidelity asked me the other day if I want to enroll in this voice print thing so that I don't have to go through all the multi-factor.
No.
Having seen the movie Sneakers long ago, my voice is my passport.
My voice is my passport.
Yeah, I just said no way. Anyway.
So I got a question based on what you said a little bit and what you were talking about earlier about Home Depot. Passpoint. So I walk into Home Depot. One of the reasons why I'll pick it over Lowe's is just because my phone connects automatically for my SIM card. And I was just curious on that technology. It's been around for a while?
Yep.
And it's been in airports and other things. But do you see it getting bigger based on that as well? That type of technology?
We see a lot of
automatically connected, but still securely, not just.
Yeah, we see a lot of uses for that. For Home Depot, it was really important to them because that Home Depot app is hugely important to both their customer base and also to not having to staff a lot more employees in the aisles. And the problem is you get into Home Depot, sure you can use the Wi-Fi. Number one, cellular signal often suffers in there because you're in an aisle of a bunch of concrete. You can use the Wi-Fi, but you have to connect to the Wi-Fi. And people don't know to connect to the Wi-Fi. And so the phone just wouldn't work, and now I got to go seek out a store associate. So Passpoint is really interesting there because if you're using Verizon, AT&T, maybe, I can't remember if it's T-Mobile or not, and you've got a SIM from that vendor, there's a information element advertised on the Wi-Fi signal that says, hey, Passpoint is available here if you have one of these sort of supported SIMs, and the phone will just connect automatically. So it's good for that purpose from a connectivity standpoint. The only caution I have from a security standpoint is you're on Home Depot's network at that point. You're not tunneled out to a carrier. You're terminated locally onto some local network. We thought about doing that at one of these HackerCons to just like show people what could be done, and we decided it would piss them off too much, so we didn't do it. But yeah, we see a lot of interest in that technology from kind of retail stores, hospitality, places like that. And the benefit is you're not on an open Wi-Fi network. The other development that's happening though, related to security is Wi-Fi WPA3 with enhanced open. So it's still an open network. You're not providing any credentials to get onto it, but it's encrypted. And you won't necessarily know that from just looking at it, but it's a simple crypto exchange that you can build a shared key. And now you're doing essentially Wi-Fi encryption over it. It doesn't know who you are. There's no authentication associated with it, but your data is protected. We're seeing that one grow as well. It doesn't have the benefit of kind of the automatic get you on the network, but it does provide security on a guest network.
Well, I think that Jon and Kim did an excellent job. Let's give them a big round of applause. And now give yourself a big round of applause for attending this today.
We think you did an excellent job.
Well, thank you. And then I'm passing it on to JD to wrap it up.
So, Elaine, great job.
Thank
well
you.
done. Kim, thank you for coming. And Jon, excellent job. We really appreciate you guys coming. On your table, there's a little bit of a gift for you to scan and send us your information so we can send you a gift. So it should be on your table. Guys, listen, ultimately, an incredibly important topic. And just as you can tell, just experts in the industry. And most importantly today, I learned that I can't say that I don't trust my wife anymore. I can't use that zero trust with her anymore. I just can't use that term with her anymore. I now understand it, so thank you for explaining that. Now, on a serious note, really great information. We really appreciate you guys taking time to come and participate, and come and see us at our booth if you haven't seen us. Aruba's there and Cox is there. We really appreciate you guys taking some time this afternoon. So please grab some more food and drinks as you mingle, but thank you for your time, and thanks again for the panel for coming in and participating.